I would imagine that most of the critique of your article is coming from people on the left, right?
So far, yeah, exactly.
And I would imagine the reason why is because what you're talking about is essentially racism 1.0. And I think we need to define some of the terminology here. I think it's very important. Okay. Racism 1.0 is what most people think of when they think of the word racism. It's, it's a personal animosity or bigotry towards a particular racial group, right? And it's sort of an internal attitude that a person has. But what I would say is the reason that you're getting the critique from the left particularly is because that movement, what you're talking about, sort of anti-racism 1.0, I mean, we're all on board with that. You'd be hard pressed to find anyone who is not, and that's just the problem. You were talking to your students, you're asking them, are they anti-racist? But they know that in today's environment, the terminology's all been messed up. And so the very first thing you have to do in any sort of a conversation is define the terms. So you actually are talking about the same thing.
Bingo. Well, and let me add to that. One of the critiques I've gotten from my friends on the right, which I think is entirely fair, is, well, what do you mean by anti-racism? You haven't replaced it with a clear definition. That wasn't on purpose. I just didn't think about it while writing the essay, because I like your definition of racism 1.0. I'm not saying that there can't be more in there. I'm not saying that, are there clear instances when people used policy as a tool of racism? Sure, yeah, I can think of a couple. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But I also think that when we talk in vernacular terms, most people think of, I dislike a certain group of people based on the color of their skin. Redefining that quickly without slowing things down and saying, hey, it's okay, we're expanding the definition, like we'll catch you up. It's like, it just, to me, has caused so much more confusion. And it just hasn't been helpful. And also, so you said something that's really important. You said every person of conscience should agree on racism 1.0, that it's bad and we should get rid of it. Exactly. And I think that the progressive left, on the one hand, this has been a challenge for them, has been to say, wow, if we disentangle our conception of racism, what we face is that good people of conscience will band together and drive out all of the racism 1.0. That's a good thing to me. That's what we should do. And to be clear, there are real actual cases. When I look at the case, so I cite the case in the essay of Davis School District. Now, I also want to be careful here. I cannot imagine what it's like to be in a school district that has had some problems with something and then is plastered everywhere in the news. My guess is that Davis School District in Utah is trying very hard to root out the problem, to address it, and I'm going to extend as much grace as I can. I am not there. All I've seen are the news reports. At the same time, this is hard work, right? And I think it's on the one hand, I agree with you. Everybody is on board with getting rid of racism 1.0, and yet it still exists in schools in a way where there's, and I don't know if you've read the report on that, it was pretty ugly stuff. The kind of stuff that the kind of stuff that all good people of conscience should come together to say, that has no place among us. So to me, this is a really good opportunity to say, hey, you want to talk about systemic injustice? I'm right there with you. We're going to disagree a little bit, and I get into that, right? School choice, family structure, that kind of stuff. But let's have those conversations. But pause for a second. Can we all agree on the stuff that we can all agree on? Because I think we're passing up a whole lot of stuff.
See,
so that's, sorry, go ahead. And then I want to get back to the people on the right.
I would just say this. This is where I think, and I'm listening, and I'm kind of give you kind of the devil's advocate view on this. Okay. If I'm Ibram Kendi or one of the more radical anti-racist types who have really pushed the term anti-racism, right, and have defined it in the way that they have, they're going to say, look, we totally get it. We get what you're saying. Racism, bigotry exists, but but the thing is what they're driving at is that if you get rid of all of the animosity, the personal sort of racism 1.0, racism 2.0, systemic injustice, disparities that exist between groups still can exist and still will exist. And so what they're saying is we're not addressing the racism 1.0 side of it. That's sort of we get that. That's already baked into the cake. They're trying specifically everyone, what you're talking about is the sort of liberal view of racism that has existed forever. Their idea here is racism is systemic and we need to change the systems. And so for you to say, hey, let's just try and make people not be bigoted, they're going to say, you're missing the point. We've already largely done that, and the disparities still exist. So the racism isn't primarily rooted in the attitudes of individuals, but within the structure of society itself. And so they would say to you, what you're doing doesn't solve the problem.
That's a fantastic steal, man. So I'm going to hang something on the shelf so we don't forget to come back to it. I want to talk about the people on the right and kind of why it's challenging for them in a minute. But to your point, I think you're probably right. That would be what people would say. And the pushback I've gotten from the left has included, you're just watering down racism, right? You're making it easy to be an anti-racist. And that's going to leave people saying, well, I don't say slurs, so I'm done, I'm good. That's a valid critique. I don't think that's what I'm actually saying, but I can understand why that could be a problem. What I'm arguing is about priorities. What I'm saying is that there are a lot of people out there. Yeah, like it's clear, like we've kind of won the war about whether racism is good or bad. That doesn't change the fact that there's still a lot of people out there saying some horrible things, right? When Davis School District is still in the news, as one example, I think that the racism 1.0 still deserves attention. And good news, we can do more than one thing at a time. I never said that we can only do one set of things. But I am saying that, like, I guess the way I would phrase it is it's exasperating to me that we're still having these fights. But part of the reason why we're having these fights on the basic stuff, on the easy stuff, is because we've tried to expand the definition of racism to be so big that now there's a lot of people who are disagreeing around the margins. Like, let's just get this done, right? Let's get some of the center stuff really, really nailed down strong. And then if we want to talk about systemic injustice, cool. I'm probably going to disagree with you on a little bit more there than I do on racism 1.0, but that's a conversation worth having and one that I'm open to. I just think that we should start with where the vast majority of people agree with us. And by the way, so this is the other thing I would say. I would be thrilled to have people say, we've already won that war, because I think that that's not actually what people say. And the pushback I've gotten is, oh, no, there's still racists everywhere. Good, let's fix that. Let's attack that.
Also, I would also wonder, how do you even measure if that war has been won for racism 1.0? Racism 2.0, we can actually measure this. You know, we can fight all day about, have we won the war on racism? Like, do people in their hearts show personal animosity and bigotry? That doesn't really matter. What matters is if it affects people. And so I would say someone on the left would look at this and say, look, if this isn't closing the disparities between white people and black people, it's all just talk and nonsense until we actually see results and the gaps between blacks and whites, until we get greater equity, as they would say. Like, this is just a lot of feel-good talk. What we really need is because we're not finding in our workplaces there's all sorts of overt racists out there. What we're finding is that in the outcomes that we're seeing in society, there are these large disparities that, even as, you know, let's look at it this way. From 1960 to now, overt racism 1.0 has declined. Disparities between whites and blacks have gotten bigger, or at least have stayed the same, let's say, something like that. Or have not changed, let's say. So what that would say is, why is it that as racism 1.0 goes down, racism 2.0, the disparities aren't being fixed? So they would say to you, and I'll present this as kind of their thing, is they would say, you're saying we just need to go even harder at this one that's already going down when it hasn't shown any measurable results in benefit.